He's stronger than I, who coming shall rule over me. What?
The first trailer for In the Hand of Dante makes one thing clear immediately. Netflix is not trying to sell this as just another glossy crime thriller with famous faces and a dark color palette. This looks like one of those films that wants to be dangerous, literary, spiritual, violent, and self-serious all at once. And honestly, that is exactly why I cannot stop thinking about it. On the surface, you can pitch it in the simplest possible way. Oscar Isaac plays two roles, one in the present and one in the past, while a priceless manuscript drags writers, gangsters, killers, and power brokers into the same orbit. That already sounds strong, but the trailer is clearly aiming for something much more loaded than a simple stolen object narrative. It is selling this as a movie about the cost of art, the seduction of meaning, and the ugly people who gather the second beauty becomes worth money. That is a much more interesting movie. The smartest thing this trailer does is lean directly into duality. Oscar Isaac is not just carrying the modern-day thread as writer Nick Tosches, he is also playing Dante Alighieri himself, and that split gives the entire movie a conceptual engine most crime thrillers never even attempt. One man is trapped in a present-day underworld built on greed, bargaining, violence, and cultural theft. The other is tied to the act of creation itself, to the writing of something sacred enough to survive centuries. By putting those two paths in the same film and letting Isaac stand at the center of both, In the Hand of Dante immediately stops feeling like a conventional adaptation and starts feeling like a confrontation between what art is worth spiritually and what people are willing to do to possess it materially. That tension is all over the trailer. The modern storyline, presented in black and white, feels grimy, paranoid, and morally diseased. Nick is pulled toward the original manuscript of the Divine Comedy, not because the world reveres it in a clean, academic way, but because criminals, collectors, and power players can smell value on it like blood in the water. John Malkovich's mafia boss does not care about transcendence. Gerard Butler's assassin is not there to admire poetry. The manuscript is treasure, leverage, status, and currency. That makes the present-day story instantly more corrosive because it turns one of literature's great works into a battlefield where money and violence try to overpower meaning. And when a story starts from that premise, you already know nobody walks away clean. But the trailer would not feel this compelling if it only had the gangster angle. What gives it real weight is the way it keeps cutting back to Dante's world as if to remind us what the thing at the center of all this actually cost to make. That is where Julian Schnabel's sensibility seems to be doing the heavy lifting. He is not treating Dante as a dry historical figure. He appears to be framing him like an artist dragged through torment, vision, obsession, and spiritual labor. So while Nick is moving through a criminal ecosystem where the manuscript is an object to be hunted, Dante exists in a parallel register where the manuscript is an act of suffering, devotion, and expression. That contrast is what gives the whole movie its pulse. It is not just past versus present. It is creation versus corruption, revelation versus exploitation. And I think that is exactly why the movie feels so much bigger than its premise summary. The cast helps a lot too, because Netflix clearly did not build this as a small, intimate chamber piece. Oscar Isaac is already doing the heavy thematic lifting, but then you throw in Gerard Butler, Jason Momoa, John Malkovich, Gal Gadot, Al Pacino, Martin Scorsese, and a whole supporting ensemble that makes the film feel more like an event than a niche literary experiment. Even from the trailer alone, you can feel the movie using star presence as part of its texture. Butler looks like he belongs in the film's ugliest corners. Malkovich instantly gives the criminal thread weight just by opening his mouth. And Momoa's role, even in brief glimpses, feels important because the trailer frames him one of the forces pushing directly against Nick in the present-day storyline. This is not subtle casting. It is bold, theatrical, and a little excessive in a way that actually fits the material. Because this story should feel excessive, any movie built around Dante. Organized crime, spiritual symbolism, literary obsession, murder. And multiple timelines should not feel restrained. It should feel feverish. It should feel like it is trying to drag you through different circles of temptation and corruption while insisting there is still something wholly buried under all the filth. And that is what the trailer is selling better than anything else. Not narrative simplicity, but mood and collision. This is a movie where the manuscript is both a sacred artifact and a cursed object, a beacon and a target, something people want to understand and something they want to own. That contradiction is what makes the trailer so sticky in my head. I also really like that the film does not seem embarrassed by its own ambition. A lot of prestige thrillers get scared of sounding too literary, too symbolic, or too openly obsessed with big themes. This one seems to be sprinting in the opposite direction. It wants the religious weight. It wants the artistic mythology. It wants the criminal grime. It wants the philosophical overlap between Danny's descent and Nick's descent. The trailer is practically screaming that the two stories are mirrors of each other, with one driven by artistic creation and the other by spiritual and moral decay. If the final film can truly connect those threads instead of merely placing them side by side, then In the Hand of Dante could be one of the most unusual Netflix originals in a long time. That said, this kind of movie lives or dies on execution. A trailer can make thematic density look intoxicating, but a feature has to actually carry it. The danger here is obvious. A film this loaded with symbolism, dual roles, literary prestige, and stylized criminal tension could absolutely collapse into self-importance if it is not disciplined. It could become the kind of movie that is so busy admiring its own depth that it forgets to emotionally grab the audience. But the reason I am still leaning optimistic is the combination of Isaac and Schnabel. Isaac is one of those actors who can make interior conflict feel electric even when a movie is speaking in grand, abstract terms. And Schnabel has always been drawn to artists as damaged, haunted people rather than museum pieces. That is the right instinct for material like this. And if the film really understands that Nick and Dante are not just parallel characters, but parallel forms of entrapment, then it could hit very hard. Because what the trailer keeps hinting at is that both men are traveling through layered worlds trying to figure out what matters most to them. Dante moves through the pain of creation. Nick moves through the filth surrounding possession, desire, crime, and status. One man gives birth to meaning. The other is swallowed by the fight over meaning's remains. That is such a rich idea for a thriller that it almost feels too ambitious for streaming, which might be exactly why it stands out. Netflix releases In the Hand of Dante on June 24th, and based on this first trailer, the film is not interested in being easy, clean, or disposable. It wants to be dangerous art wrapped in a crime story. It wants to be about manuscripts, but also about hunger, about faith, but also about ownership.